The topic of this video, guys, is going to be about spirituality versus science. Spirituality versus science. In our modern time period, in our modern society, science is pretty much the fucking everything now. Science is the new god, so to speak. Everybody fucking cares about science now. Spirituality is kind of like not really cared too much about now, especially if you're from fucking America or Europe. You're not gonna, nobody really cares too much about fucking spirituality, at least not in a professional sense. Maybe perhaps people, they in their spare time they meditate and they think they're being very spiritual. But anyway, the topic of this video, guys, is gonna be about spirituality versus science. Super fucking important, guys. Spirituality versus science. Is the fucking camera becoming fucked up again like last time? Shit, it's overheating. I'm touching my camera, guys. It's fucking hot as hell. Hopefully it's not going to melt the sensor or anything like that. Spirituality. Double checking that. Spirituality versus science, guys. In our modern society, day and age and whatever, everything's pretty much about science now, a little bit, to some extent. Especially in a professional academic sense, that science has pretty much taken over the mantle of like religion. God isn't like really cared too much about in academic circles. Nobody really fusses too much about religion, spirituality. Now maybe, except perhaps in your spare time, you might be doing some weird meditation thing, and you might think that's very spiritual. But science versus spirituality, guys, fucking hell, man. If I point my finger out, is the camera fucking getting overheated? I'm touching my camera and it's fucking hot as shit. Science versus spirituality, guys. Where do I even begin with this video? Science is pretty much all about the physical material world. Science is all about experimentation and observation. Spirituality is more about the outside this material world, looking at our soul and all that type of stuff, finding enlightenment from within, not just looking at the material world, not just doing observations and experimentations. We're looking at our soul. We're trying to figure out what life is actually about through being introspective and meditation and contemplation, where science is a lot more about like observation, experimentation. We look at the world around us and we try and put two and two together. We do experiments, we conduct experiments, we do all these types of things, and we're trying to like to really figure out the true nature of our world by doing observations and experimentations. That's how I would kind of dichotomize science versus philosophy, science. Now, spirituality versus science, I've got it written down somewhere. Spirituality versus science. Spirituality is more about us looking at our own souls, meditation, contemplation, looking outside of the physical material world, looking into ourselves. And science is more about observation, experimentation. That is like how I dichotomize these two things. But what are you getting at? What is like more important? That's what I'm really thinking about in terms of like the whole scope of our history. Spirituality has kind of like pretty much served as like a way for us to like figure out what our purpose and meaning and existential stuff is. Spirituality, I would say, in regards to like our history, was far more important. It still is important today because there's still so many different types of religious people and stuff like that. Spirituality versus science is so important because if you look at human history, you can kind of see human history as like this one big fat tug of war between like the science and philosophy and spirituality. It's kind of like this big fat tug of war, even though it's kind of dumb as well, because you can see it's kind of a little bit wishy-washy, because spirituality, it can be seen as a science and a philosophy in and of itself, but still, I like to see it's so interesting if you look at human history in this way, that human history is this one big fat tug of war between science and philosophy and objectivity and like spirituality. It's like a tug of war between these two things, and we're caught in the middle, and we're trying to see, and a lot of us, we try and pick sides. A lot of us, we go for our spirituality, and a lot of us, we go for science, objectivity, materialism, etc. But which one's actually better? Science is like, again, it's not like it's mutually exclusive. You have to pick and choose. You can use both, are like very useful tools in man's arsenal, because science has brought us all of this fucking advanced technology, the computational things. Look at this Macintosh Plus, guys, Steve Jobs, laptops, computers, all that lighting infrastructure, the electrolytes, all of this stuff, the computer systems there, all of that emerged from science, more or less. But spirituality is actually very much also important. Science, I heard it said before that science explains how, but not why. If you look at like our universe, why with the laws of physics, science can explain how these laws of physics operate and work, but science doesn't explain why these laws of physics even fucking exist in the first place, why our entire universe came into existence in the first place. That's kind of like, science can only explain how, but not why. And spirituality is a little bit different. Spirituality tries to offer like the why explanation, especially religion. Spirituality tries to offer you like why you're alive, like God created everything in us and etc. and stuff like that. That's like a type of example to use about like how spirituality tends to like try and explain the why, not the how. Science is all about how everything in our universe works, the material, physical world. Science explains the how, but not the why. That's so, isn't that interesting? The laws of physics, they exist, but why? Science can only explain how these types of laws of physics exist and how they operate and etc. But science can't offer you this type of explanation on why they exist to begin with, why anything in our universe is the way it is, why. Only how. Science is all about how certain things work in our physical material world, but not why they work the way they do. It's so interesting. It's not very interesting, guys. The laws of physics. Science can only explain to you how these laws of physics operate and work in our universe, but science can't explain to you why they even exist to begin with, why anything in our universe is the way it is. Science can never offer you that type of why explanation, why. Only how. That's so funny. All these dumbass fucking scientists, they're so fucking full of themselves. They don't realize that science, it can only explain how certain things work off experimentation, observation, but not why. The why is always going to be left unanswered regarding science. Obviously, religion, spirituality, God did everything. That's like the why. But obviously, that's kind of a little bit dubious as well. But spirituality versus science, you can look at our entire history as one big fat tug of war between like spirituality, religion, and science and philosophy. It was like this tug of war that was going on. Obviously, I'm making it seem like these two things are contradictory, even though there's like a lot of grayness to them and they blend into each other as well. Like certain, like spirituality has like a lot, there's some certain spiritual practices that are very philosophical as well. Well, you know, spirituality versus science regarding our history, what is more important, guys? I would like to believe that to some extent science is very much more important because all our technology is like the child of science. Spirituality hasn't really gotten us anything tangible in regards to like the material world. Spirituality hasn't been offering us medicine, cures to diseases. Only science has been doing that. Spirituality versus science. I would like to say that science is just far more practical, useful for the human being, much more beneficial, better to embrace science than spirituality. But even though it's kind of like science, again, it only explains how. Science doesn't offer any type of us human beings any like higher existential purpose, meaning, fulfillment, any of that. So that doesn't come from science, guys. That comes from looking at our own souls. Science can only explain the how. Laws of physics, they exist, but how? Only science doesn't explain why these certain laws of physics exist as they do. Science can only offer you the explanation on how they operate in our universe, these laws of physics, but not the why, not the where. Where did it all come from? Why do we exist? Science can never answer these types of questions. Science can only explain the how. All right, why do we exist? Because of the evolutionary processes and stuff. The evolutionary process that we emerged from the ocean, and then we started to slowly become more sophisticated, and then we turned into apes, and now we're cavemen. Now we're modern men. That type of like that's like the how, but not the why. Why did all of this like fear? Like, why did that process even begin to? Why did life even emerge to begin with? Why? Where did it all come from? It's kind of that's always going to be left unanswered, but it's kind of very much fascinating because you can look at human history. That's one big fat tug of war between spirituality, religion, and science and philosophy. Regarding like spirituality versus science, which one's more important? Honestly, I would like to say that science is a lot more important because like spirituality, no cures for diseases, no technology, all of our like sophisticated infrastructure came from science, not from fucking spirituality, even though spirituality is very much important as well, guys. Because science does not offer the human being any type of higher existential purpose. That's kind of like what's very much missing regarding science. No, the human being pretty much, we just become like fucking biochemical machines. We're fucking soulless objects. We're just like fucking, we're soulless objects. We're biomechanical machines, biochemical machines, not mechanical. I do think that science pretty much, if you're only going to be concerned about science, materialism, etc., so if you're not going to give two fucks about religion, then what's going to happen, guys, is that you're going to be very much depressed because the human being, according to science, we're just going to be rendered as like biochemical machines. We're like fucking soulless objects. We're just a fucking machine. We're no different from like sticks and stones, rocks. We're just like fucking atoms put together according to science, because science can't analyze our soul, so the soul doesn't exist. Then if you're only going to be concerned about science and fucking materialism and etc., and you're not going to give a fuck about spirituality and religion, okay, so then us human beings, we're just biochemical machines. We're soulless objects because, you know, science, we can't see the soul inside of us, so we're just fucking soulless objects. We're like fucking sticks and stones, rocks, just atoms put together. You can see spirituality is very much needed, but I would say that science is a little bit more important because medicine, technology, etc. comes from science. But anyway, all of human history you can see as a tug of war between science, philosophy, and spirituality and religion. Religion, spirituality versus science and philosophy. Anyway, don't want this video to be too long, but I think that's about it, guys, and really carefully contemplate on everything I said in this video.